A billionaire noticed a little girl waiting alone after school every day, silent still, and never picked up. When he asked why she wouldn't go home, her answer froze him. The deeper he searched, the more terrifying the truth became. Because officially, that little girl didn't exist. The cold came early that afternoon, sliding through the streets of Boston like something quiet and deliberate. Outside Hawthorne Academy, black cars lined the curb in perfect order. Drivers stepped out in pressed coats. Mothers bent down to fix scarves. Fathers checked their watches, already thinking about their next meeting. Children ran into open arms, laughter rising into the fading light. Cassian Vale stood at the edge of it all, one hand tucked into the pocket of his navy overcoat, watching the scene with practiced detachment. To him, it was just another transaction waiting to happen. Another building, another acquisition, another number on a page, until he noticed her. A small figure near the iron gate. She wasn't moving. While the other children disappeared one by one, she remained exactly where she had been, her thin shoulders wrapped in a worn navy coat that looked too light for the weather. A faded backpack rested against her legs. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her, as if she had been taught not to take up space. She didn't cry. She didn't call out. She just waited. Minutes passed. The street emptied. Even the voices faded into distant echoes. The sky dimmed into that gray-blue hour where the cold feels sharper. Cassian frowned. That was when the girl finally shifted. Not toward home, but closer to the gate, as if she were afraid to leave it. He walked over his polished shoes, quiet against the pavement. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice low, careful. "Is someone coming for you?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were too calm, too tired. "They always say they are," she whispered. Cassian paused. Something about that answer didn't belong to a child. He crouched slightly, studying her. "Do you want me to call them?" For a second, she didn't breathe. Then she shook her head. Very slowly, and in a voice so soft it almost disappeared into the cold air, she said, "I don't want to go home." Cassian didn't respond right away. The wind moved between them, sharp and thin, carrying the last sounds of the city pulling away. The school gates were nearly closed now, the guard watching from a distance with mild impatience as if this were routine. That was what bothered him most. Routine. "Come on," Cassian said gently, straightening. "Let's go inside for a minute." The girl hesitated, then followed, quiet, obedient, her small footsteps barely making a sound against the stone floor of the administration building. Inside, everything felt warm, polished, controlled. Fluorescent lights, clean desks, order. A woman behind the front desk looked up, Maris Bell, mid-30s, composed but visibly tense the moment she saw the girl. "Oh, Elawan," she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're still here." Cassian caught it, the flicker of discomfort. "Still here," he repeated. Maris cleared her throat quickly. "Yes, well, sometimes her pickup runs late." "How late?" Cassian asked, a pause. "Arrangements are in place," she said carefully. Cassian didn't like that answer. He stepped closer to the desk. "Let me see her file." Maris hesitated just a fraction too long before pulling up the digital record. Elawan Frost, age 7, Guardian M. Wren, address Back Bay, tuition paid in full. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Cassian glanced down at the girl. She stood with her hands clasped again, eyes lowered, as if she had learned to disappear even in bright rooms. "Call the Guardian," he said. Maris nodded and dialed. The phone rang once, then cut. She tried again, disconnected. The silence stretched. Cassian's jaw tightened slightly. "Try again," he said. Maris didn't move this time. Behind him, the girl took one small step back, like she already knew what would happen next, and like she was afraid of it. The city had shifted by the time they left the school. Boston at dusk carried a different weight, streetlights flickering on windows glowing gold against the cold traffic, thinning into quiet streams of motion. Inside the black sedan, everything felt insulated, warm, controlled. Ellie sat in the back seat, hands folded over her backpack posture, straight as if she had practiced being small. Cassian watched her through the reflection in the glass. "Is the address in your file where you stay?" he asked. A pause. She nodded once. But it didn't feel like truth. It felt like something memorized. The car turned into Back Bay, where brick townhouses stood shoulder to shoulder, elegant and expensive, their doors polished, their steps clean, their windows alive with light. They slowed. Number 18, then 22. Cassian leaned forward slightly. "Stop the car." The driver obeyed. Cassian stepped out, the cold hitting him instantly, sharper now, more deliberate. He walked along the sidewalk, eyes scanning the brass numbers beside each door. No 20. He checked again. And again. Nothing. The space where it should have been simply didn't exist. No construction gap, no boarded entrance, no hidden doorway, just absence. Behind him, the car door opened quietly. Ellie stepped out. "I told you," she said. Her voice wasn't defiant, just tired. Cassian turned to her slowly. "You knew this place wasn't real." She looked at the ground, a small nod. "Then where do you go?" he asked, softer now. A long silence stretched between them. The wind moved through the narrow street, carrying the faint sound of distant traffic. Finally, she answered, "Where they tell me." Cassian felt something cold settle in his chest. Not confusion, not concern, something deeper. Because that wasn't a child describing a home. That was a child describing control. By the time they returned to Cassian's residence, the city had gone quiet under a thin layer of night. Ellie stepped inside cautiously, as if expecting the warmth to disappear the moment she touched it. The marble floors reflected soft, golden light, the air carrying the faint scent of cedar and something clean, something untouched. She didn't wander. She didn't ask questions. She stood near the entrance, waiting for permission. Cassian noticed that immediately. "You can come in," he said gently. She nodded and followed her small shoes, making almost no sound against the polished floor. A house manager brought warm soup, clean clothes, and a folded blanket. Ellie accepted everything with careful hands, whispering thank you each time, her voice barely audible. When she saw the bed in the guest room, she froze. It was too big, too soft, too safe. "Do I sleep on top?" she asked quietly. "So I don't mess it up." Cassian looked away for a second. "No," he said. "You can sleep however you want." She nodded but still sat on the edge as if unsure she was allowed to stay. Across the hall, Cassian stood with Nolan Reed, his voice low, controlled. "No records," Nolan said. "No valid address, no guardian. The name in her file doesn't exist outside the school system." Cassian's expression hardened. "What about medical records?" "Nothing. No hospital, no insurance, no registry. It's like she appeared out of nowhere 3 years ago." Cassian exhaled slowly. "And the tuition paid through a charitable trust," Nolan said, "indirectly tied to the Voss Foundation." That name landed heavy. Cassian turned his gaze toward the hallway where Ellie sat alone on the bed, holding the spoon like it might disappear if she let go. For the first time, the truth became unavoidable. This wasn't neglect. Someone had built a life for her, just enough for her to exist, and nothing more. Ellie woke before the house did. By the time the first light touched the windows, she was already dressed, shoes on, backpack zipped, standing near the door like someone waiting to be moved. Cassian found her there. "You're up early," he said. She nodded. "I didn't want to be late. For what?" She hesitated. "For wherever I go next." The answer was simple. Too simple. Cassian crouched slightly, keeping his voice steady. You're not going anywhere until we understand what's happening. Her fingers tightened around the straps of her backpack. That's what they say first, she whispered. Who the ones who decide? Cassian felt the words settle heavily between them. He guided her toward the kitchen where breakfast had been prepared, warm toast fruit, a glass of milk. Ellie sat carefully, back straight movements, small and precise, as if she had practiced being invisible even at a table meant for comfort. Can I eat slowly? She asked. Cassian frowned. Why, so it lasts longer. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he poured himself coffee. He didn't intend to drink. Ellie, he said after a moment. Has anyone ever told you not to talk about certain things? She nodded immediately. What happens if you do? Her eyes flickered toward the doorway, instinctive, afraid. They said no one would believe me, she murmured. And I'd be moved again. Moved. Not sent home. Not taken care of. Moved. Cassian leaned back slightly, the pieces locking together with quiet precision. This wasn't random. This was structured, controlled. He looked at her not as a child who was lost, but as a child who had been managed. Did anyone ever hurt you? He asked softly. She shook her head, but she didn't look relieved. She looked trained, and that somehow was worse. The ballroom shimmered in gold and glass. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across polished marble, and the low hum of conversation floated between donors, politicians, and carefully curated smiles. Cassian Vale stood among them in a tailored navy suit, a quiet storm behind calm eyes. On stage, Lenora Voss spoke with effortless grace. Every child deserves safety, she said, her voice warm, practiced, met with gentle applause. Every child deserves to be seen. Cassian didn't clap. He watched. Lenora moved like someone who had never been questioned. Elegant, composed, untouchable. The kind of woman who built reputations out of generosity and buried truths beneath it. Nolan's voice murmured softly through Cassian's earpiece. She oversees 3 private educational trusts. 2 have sealed beneficiary records. 1 links to Ellie's tuition path. Cassian's gaze didn't shift. Any guardianship filings redacted. Restricted access, someone's shielding it. Cassian stepped forward as the applause faded. When Lenora turned, their eyes met. Her smile arrived instantly. Mr. Vale, she said smoothly. I didn't expect to see you here. I like to understand where money goes, he replied. Her expression held, but something beneath it tightened. Cassian tilted his head slightly. Do you ever work with children named Frost, just a fraction of a second? That was all, but it was enough. Lenora's eyes cooled barely invisibly, but Cassian caught it. I work with many children, she said lightly. Names blur after a while. Some shouldn't, Cassian said. A pause. Then the smile returned, perfect as before. I'm sure you mean well, she replied. But some situations are more complicated than they appear. Across the room, Cassian noticed Maris Bell speaking quietly with a man in a dark coat. When Lenora followed his gaze, her tone softened but sharpened underneath. Be careful what you involve yourself in, Mr. Vale, she said gently. Not every child wants to be found. Cassian held her gaze. No, he said quietly. But some are waiting to be. The house was quieter that night. Snow had begun to fall soft and steady, pressing the world into silence beyond the tall windows. Inside, the lights were dimmed low, casting warm shadows across the walls. Ellie sat cross-legged on the floor near the coffee table, a sheet of paper in front of her, a pencil held carefully between her fingers. Cassian watched from a distance. She didn't draw like most children. No bright colors, no smiling faces, only lines. Precise, repeated, remembered. When she finished, she didn't show him right away. She stared at the drawing for a long moment, as if deciding whether it was safe to exist. Ellie, Cassian said gently, Can I see? She hesitated, then slowly turned the paper toward him. A townhouse, narrow, brick, detailed beyond her age, a red door, black iron railings, and one window on the second floor glowing faintly yellow. Cassian leaned closer. "This place," he said. "You've been there." She nodded, when her voice was soft, distant, when I was smaller. Cassian's jaw tightened slightly. "Who brought you there?" A pause. "I don't know," she said. They didn't like questions. Cassian studied the drawing again. It wasn't imagination. It was memory. "Which room was yours?" he asked. Ellie's small finger lifted, pointing at the glowing window. "That one," she whispered. Then after a moment, it had a lock. Cassian looked up sharply. "On your side," she shook her head. And in a voice so quiet it barely reached him, she said, "On the outside." The room fell completely still. No raised voices, no dramatic reaction, just silence. Because that one detail changed everything. Across the room, Nolan's phone buzzed softly. He glanced at the screen, then at Cassian. "We found the house," he said. Cassian didn't take his eyes off the drawing. "Good," he replied quietly, because now the past had an address, and this time, it existed. The photo appeared on Cassian's phone just past midnight. Grainy, cropped from an old press shot outside a courthouse. Flashbulbs caught mid-burst men in dark coats frozen in motion. At the center stood a man identified beneath the image, Daniel Frost. Cassian studied his face, sharp-focused, the kind of man who saw things others preferred to ignore. There was tension in his posture, like someone already aware he had gone too far. Then Cassian saw it. Behind him, half hidden, a woman holding a baby wrapped in a navy blanket. The angle obscured most of her face, but the timeline matched. Naomi Frost and the child Ellie. Cassian exhaled slowly, the pieces tightening into place. Across the room, Ellie sat curled into the corner of the couch, the children's book from the storage box resting in her lap. She traced the edge of the cover with her finger over and over, like she was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. Cassian approached carefully. "Ellie," he said softly, "do you remember your father?" She didn't look up at first. Then slowly she nodded. "Not his face," she whispered. "Just how he sounded." Cassian knelt beside her. "What did he say?" A long pause. "Then he called me Firefly." The word lingered in the air. Cassian felt it settle somewhere deep, somewhere personal. Because that wasn't just a nickname. That was proof. He stood and walked back toward Nolan, his voice lower, now sharper. "She's his daughter." Nolan nodded once. "There's more." Cassian looked up. "Daniel Frost didn't just die," Nolan said. "He was investigating financial irregularities tied to multiple shell accounts." Cassian didn't need to ask the next question. "Connected to the Voss Foundation," he said. Nolan met his gaze. "Yes." Silence followed, not empty, heavy. Because this was no longer about a missing child. This was about a man who found something he shouldn't have, and a little girl who was never supposed to be found. The hallway was empty when it happened. At least that's what the school said. By the time Cassian arrived, the explanation was already prepared. Soft voices, careful wording, polite concern wrapped around something hollow. She stepped out briefly, Maris said, hands clasped too tightly. "Just a few minutes." How many, Cassian asked. 12 minutes? In a building covered in cameras. Cassian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Show me the footage," Maris hesitated. "Then it's unavailable." Of course it was. Across the room, Ellie sat in a small chair. Her hands folded, her posture perfect, her eyes fixed on the floor. But something was different now. She was trembling. Cassian moved to her side, lowering himself so he didn't tower over her. "Hey," he said quietly. "What happened?" She didn't answer, Not at first. It took time. Silence. Patience. Then finally, a lady talked to me. Cassian's expression didn't change, but something inside him sharpened. What did she say? Ellie swallowed. She smelled like flowers, she whispered, and her voice was soft. A pause. She said, "Good girls don't confuse important men." Cassian felt the air shift. Did she say anything else? Ellie nodded slightly. She said, "If I forgot how to behave." Her voice faltered just for a second. "I might have to go somewhere colder." The words settled like ice. No shouting, no threats, just control. Cassian stood slowly. Across the hall, a woman in a tailored coat passed by the glass doors, her reflection smooth, composed, untouchable. Lenora Voss. Cassian's jaw tightened. That was enough. He turned back to Maris, his voice calm but absolute. "Prepare her withdrawal papers." Maris blinked. "Mr. Vale now." No hesitation, no negotiation, because the moment someone reached her inside that building, it stopped being a school and started being a cage. The coastal town felt like a different world. Gray sky, quiet water, wind brushing against weathered wood and empty sidewalks. The kind of place people came to disappear without being noticed. Cassian stepped out of the car coat, pulled tighter against the cold, and looked toward the small house at the end of the narrow road. "No security cameras," Nolan murmured. "No recent visitors." "She lives alone." "Good," Cassian said. "That means she's not expecting us." Dr. Vera Ashbourne opened the door before they could knock. She was older than her record suggested, silver hair, sharp eyes, posture still straight despite the years. The kind of woman who had spent a lifetime making decisions others feared. "I was wondering how long it would take," she said quietly. Cassian didn't waste time. "You know why I'm here." Her gaze shifted between him and Nolan, measuring, calculating. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled faintly of old paper and tea. Shelves lined the walls filled with case files, legal books, remnants of a career that had ended too early and too quietly. They sat across from her in a narrow living room. Cassian leaned forward slightly. Elowen Frost. The name hung in the air. Vera closed her eyes for a brief moment. "I told them that case was wrong," she said. "From the beginning." Cassian's voice remained steady. "Then tell me what happened." She exhaled slowly. "After Daniel Frost died, an emergency custody petition was filed," she began. "The mother, Naomi, was declared unstable, missing, unfit. The child was placed under temporary protective supervision." "By whom?" Nolan asked. Vera's eyes hardened. "A private guardian network," she said, "backed by legal counsel connected to the Voss Foundation." Silence. Cassian didn't move. "Was there a hearing?" he asked. "There was supposed to be," Vera replied. "Naomi requested one. Evidence was submitted. I reviewed the initial filing myself." And Vera looked at him directly. "The documents changed." Cassian's jaw tightened. "Changed how key pages were replaced. Statements rewritten. The case was redirected before it could be properly heard." Her voice dropped slightly, and then pressure came. "What kind of pressure?" Nolan asked. "The kind that ends careers," Vera said simply. She stood and walked toward a cabinet, pulling out a thin folder. "I retired 2 weeks later." Cassian took the file from her, flipping it open. Inside, partial records, annotations, fragments of something incomplete but undeniable. Proof that something had been altered, controlled, hidden. "She wasn't abandoned," Cassian said quietly. Vera shook her head. "No," she replied. "She was taken, legally." A pause, then she added softer now. "And I believe her mother tried to come back for her." Cassian looked up sharply. What happened to Naomi? Vera held his gaze. "I don't know," she said. Then after a moment, "But I know this. If that child is still alive..." Her voice hardened again. Someone worked very hard to make sure she stayed invisible. The vault was colder than the street outside. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Rows of metal shelves stretching into shadow, each labeled with numbers that meant nothing unless you knew where to look. Nolan led the way. "Private estate storage," he said. "Daniel Frost's file should still be here if no one cleaned it out." Cassian followed in silence, his footsteps echoing softly against the floor. The air smelled like dust and time, like things meant to be forgotten. They found the box halfway down a narrow aisle. Frost D. Archive Hold. Cassian pulled it free himself. Inside order. Neat, precise. Tax binders, financial ledgers, legal correspondence. A silver lighter tucked beside a worn children's book with creased corners. Normal. Too normal. Cassian lifted each item slowly, methodically, until Nolan said, "Wait." He pointed to the bottom. A slight gap, false base. Cassian slid his fingers underneath and lifted. There it was. A sealed envelope taped carefully in place. Hidden, protected. He opened it. Inside, documents. Not copies, originals. Flowcharts of financial transfers across shell accounts. Names redacted, then handwritten back in. A photograph, Lenora Voss, standing beside a younger Naomi Frost, both smiling for a camera that didn't understand what it was capturing. And a letter. Cassian unfolded it. The handwriting was steady, controlled, urgent. "If anything happens to me, protect Naomi. Protect Ellie. They are not safe." Cassian didn't breathe for a moment. Behind him, Nolan spoke quietly. "This wasn't just accounting." "No," Cassian said. He turned another page. More notes. More connections. Charitable trusts linked to private custody channels. Legal intermediaries. Quiet transfers masked as philanthropy. And one final sheet torn at the edge. A reference to a beneficiary clause. A name partially visible. L. Ellie. Cassian closed the folder slowly. Now it made sense. She wasn't hidden by accident. She was hidden because she mattered. Back at the house, Ellie sat on the couch, the children's book in her lap. The moment she saw it, her fingers froze, then trembled. "It's his," she whispered. Cassian stepped closer. "You remember?" She nodded, eyes filling. "He used to read it to me, near a window." Her voice broke, not from fear this time, from memory. Cassian sat down beside her, closer than before. Not across, not distant. For the first time, the space between them disappeared. And in that quiet moment, with a child holding on to the last piece of her past, Cassian made a decision. He wasn't walking away. Not now. Not ever. The audio file was damaged. Static bled through the edges, distorting the voice just enough to make it feel distant, like something pulled from underwater or from a place time had tried to erase. Nolan adjusted the volume. "Recovered from an old legal intake archive," he said quietly. 6 years ago. It's the only match tied to Naomi Frost. Cassian didn't sit. He stood beside the desk, one hand resting against the edge, eyes fixed on the small speaker. "Play it." The recording clicked. A pause, then a breath. Unsteady, controlled, afraid. "My name is Naomi Frost." Her voice trembled, but she forced it forward. "I don't know if this message will reach anyone who can help, but I need someone to hear this." Static. Cassian's jaw tightened. "They're trying to take my daughter," Naomi continued. "Not through force, through paperwork, through lies that look clean on the surface." Another breath. "I didn't abandon her. I never would." Ellie, sitting across the room, slowly looked up. Cassian didn't stop the recording. "I've tried to fight them," Naomi said, her voice breaking just slightly. "But every door leads back to the same people. Every system bends the same way." A faint sound in the background, maybe a door closing, maybe footsteps. Naomi lowered her voice. "If something happens to me, tell her I kept trying." The line cracked. Then tell Ellie. I didn't stop. Silence. The recording ended. No resolution. No proof of what came after. Just a voice, and the truth it carried. The room felt smaller, colder. Ellie's fingers tightened around the book in her lap. She didn't leave, she asked barely above a whisper. Cassian turned to her slowly. Every instinct told him to protect her from uncertainty. But not from truth. No, he said gently. She didn't. Ellie's eyes filled, but she didn't cry loudly. The tears came quietly, slipping down without resistance. For years she had carried one belief, that she had been left behind. And now, in a single broken recording, that belief shattered. Across the room, Nolan spoke again, quieter this time. There's more. Cassian looked up. A legal notice just came in, Nolan said. They're filing to reclaim custody. Private guardian authority, Voss affiliated. The air shifted again. Fast. Sharp. Cassian exhaled slowly. They're moving, he said. Behind him, Ellie's voice trembled. Did they, find me again? Cassian turned back to her, his expression steady, grounded. No, he said. Then after a beat, they walked into the wrong place. The house felt different after the message. Not quieter, heavier, like something long buried had finally surfaced, and now everything had to rearrange itself around the truth. Ellie sat near the window, knees pulled in, Naomi's words still echoing somewhere she didn't fully understand, but felt. Cassian didn't rush her. He stood a few steps away, giving her space, the kind no one had given her before. She didn't leave you, he said gently. She was trying to come back. Ellie stared at the glass, watching the faint reflection of snow drifting past the city lights. She said that before Ellie whispered, that she'd come back. A pause. I thought she forgot. Cassian felt something tighten in his chest. She didn't forget, he said. Someone made it hard for her to reach you. Ellie nodded slowly, like she was placing a missing piece into a puzzle she had been holding alone for too long. Then she asked quietly, will they take me again? Cassian didn't answer immediately, because this time the answer mattered. They're going to try, he said. Ellie's fingers tightened slightly, but not without a fight. She looked at him, then really looked at him, not as someone passing through, not as someone temporary, something else. Why, she asked softly. Why are you helping me? The question wasn't innocent. It was careful, learned. Cassian exhaled slowly, lowering himself to sit across from her, not above, not distant. Because someone should have sooner, he said. Ellie studied him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then people don't stay, she said. It wasn't a complaint, just a fact. Cassian nodded once. I know. Silence settled between them again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was deciding. Then Ellie shifted slightly closer, almost without realizing it. A small movement, but it meant everything. That night, the storm picked up, outside wind pressing against the windows, snow covering the city in silence. Inside, Ellie woke from a nightmare. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. She ran, down the hallway, barefoot, breath shaking, until she saw him. Cassian turned at the sound. She stopped in front of him, frozen. Then suddenly, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, tight, like she was holding on to something that might disappear. Then just as quickly, she tried to pull back. I'm sorry, she whispered. Cassian gently steadied her. You don't have to apologize for being scared, he said. Ellie hesitated, then barely audible. Okay. And for the first time, she didn't let go right away. The ballroom gleamed like nothing could ever be wrong inside it. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished marble floors. Music drifted softly between conversations measured in quiet laughter and expensive restraint. Every detail perfect. Cassian Vale stepped into it like a man walking into a lie. He wore black, simple, precise, no effort wasted. Eyes turned, of course. They always did. But tonight he wasn't here to be seen. He was here to see. At the center of the room, beneath a cascade of golden light, stood Lenora Voss. She moved through the crowd like she owned not just the space, but the narrative inside it. A hand on a shoulder here. A gentle laugh there. Words about charity, about children, about care. Always about care. Cassian watched her for a long moment before approaching. When she turned and saw him, her smile appeared instantly controlled, practiced, flawless. "Mr. Vale," she said warmly, "I didn't expect you tonight." "I didn't expect to be invited," he replied. A faint flicker crossed her eyes. "But here we are." She gestured slightly, guiding him away from the crowd toward a quieter corner near the tall windows overlooking the river. Boston shimmered outside, cold, distant, untouched. "Tell me," Lenora said, her voice smooth. "What is it you think you've found?" Cassian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her. The precision of her posture, the calm in her breathing, the absolute certainty in her control. "You built something impressive," he said finally. "A system that looks like protection." Lenora's smile didn't fade. "Because it is." "No," Cassian said quietly. "It's management." That word landed. For the first time, her expression shifted just slightly. "You're involving yourself in a situation you don't understand," she replied. "That child has a name," Cassian cut in. A pause. Lenora tilted her head, studying him now with more interest than politeness. "Names can be inconvenient," she said softly. Cassian's voice dropped. "Not when they come with evidence." Silence stretched between them. Then another presence joined Gideon Voss. Older, sharper. The kind of man who didn't waste words because he didn't need to. "Mr. Vale," Gideon said calmly, "I hear you've taken an interest in one of our cases." Cassian didn't turn. "Your case seems to have taken an interest in me first." Gideon's gaze hardened slightly. "These matters are delicate," he said. "They require discretion and control," Cassian asked. Gideon smiled faintly. "Stability, another word for silence. Forgetting. For removing problems before they grow." Cassian stepped closer, his voice now low enough that only they could hear. "She's not a problem," he said. "She's proof." That was the moment everything changed. Gideon's expression didn't break, but something behind it did. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "There are consequences for turning over stones that were buried for a reason." Cassian met his gaze. "I don't bury children," he replied. The air between them turned cold. Not dramatic, not loud, just final. Across the room, laughter rose again, untouched by the conversation happening in the shadows. Lenora stepped back slightly, her composure returning fully. "You still have time to walk away," she said. Cassian looked at her one last time, then shook his head. "No," he said. Outside, snow began to fall again over the river, soft, silent, like the beginning of something that could no longer be stopped. The church didn't look like a place that held answers. It sat between two narrow streets in the older part of the city, brick worn down by decades of wind and winter, its windows dim, its doors quiet. Nothing about it suggested importance, which was exactly why it had been overlooked. Cassian stepped inside with Nolan just after noon. The air was warmer than outside, carrying the faint scent of old wood paper and something human, something lived in. A narrow staircase led down to the basement. That was where they found her. An elderly woman sat behind a folding table, sorting through boxes of files that had yellowed with time. Her hands moved slowly but carefully, like each page still mattered. She looked up when they approached. "We don't get many visitors," she said. Cassian didn't waste time. "I'm looking for Naomi Frost." The woman froze. Not dramatically, just still. Then she studied him. Why? Because of her daughter. That was enough. Her expression softened, but not with comfort. With memory. She was here, the woman said quietly. Years ago. Cassian felt the air shift. What do you remember? The woman leaned back slightly, eyes distant. She was tired, she said, but not broken. That's what I remember most. A pause. She kept saying she wasn't running away. She was trying to find a way back. Cassian swallowed slowly. To her daughter, the woman nodded. They were turning everything against her, she continued. Paperwork, legal language, people who smiled while they closed doors. Her voice dropped. She said they were trying to turn her child into paperwork. The sentence hit harder than anything else. Not taken, not lost, converted, controlled. Cassian stepped closer. Did she leave anything? The woman hesitated, then stood. She walked to the back of the room, moving past shelves stacked with forgotten names, forgotten lives. After a moment, she returned, holding a small envelope, aged, sealed, untouched. She told me to keep this, the woman said. Only if someone came asking for Ellie and knew the word. Cassian met her gaze. Firefly. The woman's breath caught. Then she handed it to him. Cassian opened it carefully. Inside, a letter. The handwriting was softer than Daniel's, but no less urgent. I did not leave her. I was pushed out of her life. Cassian read in silence. Naomi described everything. Daniel's discovery, the pressure that followed, the way every legal path bent toward the same people, how Ellie became leverage, not a child, a risk, a key, a liability. She deserves to be known, Naomi wrote, not managed, not hidden. Cassian's hands tightened slightly on the paper. At the bottom, a location, specific, precise. Probate Annex, Lower Archive. Cassian looked up slowly. Nolan already understood. That's where the originals would be, Nolan said. The ones they couldn't destroy, Cassian replied. Behind them, the woman spoke again, softer this time. She didn't give up, she said. Not once. Cassian nodded. I know. Because now, for the first time, they weren't chasing fragments anymore. They were heading straight for the truth. And this time, it had a place. Hidden. Buried. Waiting. The courthouse slept above them. Granite pillars, silent halls, locked doors. But beneath it, the city kept its secrets. Cassian moved through the narrow maintenance corridor with Nolan just behind him, the beam of a single flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was damp, colder than outside, heavy with the smell of rust and paper left too long untouched. This place wasn't meant to be used anymore, Nolan muttered. That's why it still matters, Cassian replied. They reached a steel door at the end of the passage. Archive restricted access. The lock was old, not strong. Nolan worked it open in seconds. Inside, rows of metal shelves stretched into shadow, stacked with boxes labeled in faded ink. The low hum of a broken fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows across the room. Forgotten records. Discarded truth. Cassian stepped forward, slowly scanning the shelves. Look for anything tied to Frost. Probate filings. Custody transfers, he said. Nolan split off, moving fast, but controlled. Minutes passed. Only the sound of shifting paper and distant water dripping somewhere in the dark. Then here, Nolan said. Cassian turned. A mislabeled box, stamped under another case number. Cassian pulled it free, setting it down on a metal table. He opened it. Inside, documents, originals, untouched. Not the clean versions, the real ones. He flipped through quickly. Naomi Frost petition for custody review, evidence submission pending hearing, temporary protective order, child Elawan Frost. Cassian's jaw tightened. They never intended to return her, he said. Nolan leaned in, scanning. Look at this, he added, pointing. A stamped note. Case redirected, private guardian trust. Cassian didn't speak, because that one line confirmed everything. This wasn't a failure of the system. The system had been used, deliberately, carefully. He turned another page: amendments, signatures that didn't match, dates altered, decisions rewritten, the truth replaced, but never fully erased. Then a sound. Faint. Metal shifting somewhere behind them. Nolan looked up immediately. We're not alone. The lights flickered, then steadied. Cassian closed the file, quickly handing it to Nolan. Take it, he said. What about you? I'll slow them down. Nolan hesitated just for a second, then nodded and moved toward the side exit. Footsteps echoed now. Closer. Cassian stepped into the main aisle, the darkness pressing in around him. Two figures appeared at the far end. Not uniformed, not official, just controlled, like everything else in this case. Mr. Vale, one of them said calmly. You've gone somewhere you shouldn't. Cassian didn't move. No, he replied quietly. I've gone somewhere you hoped no one would. The tension held for a second, then broke. Cassian turned sharply, moving fast down the opposite corridor, the beam of light cutting wildly through dust and shadow. Footsteps followed, not rushed, but certain. He pushed through a rusted side door, forcing it open with his shoulder, the metal groaning under pressure. Then cold air hit him. Snow. Night. Freedom. He didn't stop running until the courthouse was behind him. When he finally returned to the car, breath steady but controlled. Nolan was already inside with the files. Proof. Real. Untouched. But when Cassian stepped back into the house later, Ellie was waiting. She saw the tear in his coat, the mark on his hand, and her face changed. Did they do that because of me? She asked softly. Cassian knelt in front of her. No, he said. A pause. Then they did that because they're afraid of the truth. Ellie looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Not afraid. Not this time. Because now she understood something she never had before. She wasn't invisible. She was the reason everything was finally being seen. The courtroom felt smaller than it should have. Not in size, but in weight. Every seat filled, every breath measured, every word waiting to land. Cassian sat at the front, still composed, but nothing about him was distant anymore. Beside him, Ellie sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, her shoes barely touching the floor. This time, she wasn't hidden. Across the aisle, Lenora and Gideon Voss sat with their legal team. Calm, polished, untouched by pressure, at least on the surface. The judge entered. Everything stilled. This hearing concerns the temporary custody and legal status of Aloe Frost, the judge said. We will proceed. Lenora's attorney stood first. Confident, controlled, they spoke of stability, of protective care, of misunderstandings in complex legal structures. They framed Ellie as a child, placed for her own safety, managed discreetly, shielded from instability. No lies, just carefully shaped truth. Cassian didn't react. He waited. Then Vera Ashbourne took the stand. The room shifted the moment she spoke. Calm, precise, unafraid. She described the original custody filing, the inconsistencies, the documents that changed, the hearing that never happened, and the pressure that followed. For the first time, the narrative cracked. Then came the documents. Original filings recovered from the annex. Unaltered, undeniable. Nolan presented the financial connections quietly, but clearly linking the Voss Foundation to the legal redirection of Ellie's case. The courtroom grew colder. Lenora's composure tightened. Gideon's hands stilled. Then the audio played. Naomi's voice filled the room, broken, real, impossible to dismiss. I didn't leave her. Silence followed. Not empty, heavy, final. The judge leaned back slightly, eyes fixed on the file in front of him. Then he looked toward Ellie. "Would you like to say anything?" he asked gently. Cassian didn't move. He didn't guide her. This had to be hers. Ellie hesitated, just for a second. Then she stood, small, fragile, but steady. "I waited where they told me to wait," she said softly, "because I thought, if I was good, someone would come back for me." No one interrupted, no one moved. She swallowed, then looked at Cassian. But he did. That was it. No speech, no drama, just truth. And somehow it was enough. Because in that moment, the entire room understood something simple, undeniable. She had never been lost. She had been left. And someone finally came back. The judge closed the file slowly, and everything changed. It didn't happen all at once. Power never falls loudly. It fractures, quietly at first, then everywhere. By morning, the story had already begun to spread. Not through headlines, through whispers, legal circles, donor networks, quiet calls between people who understood what had just happened in that courtroom. By afternoon, it was public. News vans lined the street outside the Voss Foundation headquarters. Cameras waited, questions multiplied, old cases resurfaced, financial pathways were re-examined. Names once protected by silence began appearing in reports that refused to stay buried. Cassian watched it unfold from his office window. Snow fell lightly over the city, softening nothing. Behind him, Nolan spoke in low, steady updates. 2 donors pulled funding this morning. 3 more requested internal audits. The Guardian Services firm under investigation. Cassian didn't turn. "What about Gideon's subpoena pending?" And Lenora Nolan paused. "She hasn't made a statement." Cassian exhaled slowly. Of course she hadn't. She wouldn't break in public. Not yet. That evening she came to him. No cameras, no witnesses, just the quiet weight of everything collapsing around her. Lenora stood in his office as if nothing had changed. Perfect posture, calm expression, control, held together by precision. "You could have stopped this," she said softly. Cassian faced her. "You could have too." A pause. Her eyes shifted, not weak but no longer untouchable. "You think exposing this fixes anything?" she asked. "The world doesn't run on innocence. It runs on management, on decisions people don't want to see." Cassian stepped closer. "And children," he said. "Where do they fit into that system?" Lenora didn't answer immediately, because there wasn't one that sounded human. "They're protected," she said finally. Cassian's voice dropped. "No," he replied. "They're controlled." The word landed harder this time. Final. Lenora looked at him for a long moment, longer than before. Then she turned. Not defeated, but no longer invisible. When she left, the room felt clearer, not lighter, just honest. Upstairs, Ellie stood by the window watching the snow fall over a city that had once hidden her. Now it was learning her name. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was calm. Snow pressed softly against the windows, the world outside muted into white and gray. Inside, warm light filled the library, reflecting off dark wood shelves and the slow glow of the fireplace. Ellie sat curled beside Cassian. Naomi's letter resting carefully in her hands. She hadn't opened it yet. Not fully. Cassian didn't rush her. "She wrote that for you," he said gently. "You can read it when you're ready." Ellie nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper like it might disappear if she moved too fast. "Will it hurt?" she asked quietly. Cassian considered that. Maybe he said, "But it won't be the kind of hurt you had before." She looked up at him, confused. "It won't make you feel alone," he added. That seemed to matter. Ellie took a small breath, then slowly opened the letter. Her eyes moved across the page, careful, quiet. The room stayed still. Only the sound of the fire. Only the soft turning of paper. Then her lips trembled. She remembers, Ellie whispered. Cassian leaned slightly closer. What does she say? Ellie blinked through tears, voice shaking, but steady enough to continue. She said I used to hold her finger when I slept, so I wouldn't drift away. A tear slipped down her cheek. She called me Firefly. The word lingered again, not fragile this time, alive. Ellie pressed the letter gently to her chest. She didn't leave me, she said. Cassian shook his head softly. No, he said. She didn't. Ellie leaned into him, then not suddenly, not out of fear. Just naturally, like something finally made sense. Can love come back late? She asked, her voice small. Cassian looked at her for a moment, then answered simply, yes. A pause. Sometimes. That's how it survives. Ellie closed her eyes, and for the first time she didn't feel like she had been left behind. She felt found. The paperwork arrived in a plain envelope. No ceremony, no announcement. Just truth finally written where it should have been all along. Cassian sat across from Ellie at the dining table, the morning light spilling softly across the surface. The city outside had begun to thaw, winter loosening its grip one quiet day at a time. This is yours, he said, sliding the documents gently toward her. Ellie looked at them carefully, not touching yet. Is it real? She asked. Cassian nodded. It's official. She reached forward slowly, like she had learned to expect things to disappear if she moved too quickly. Her name, Elowen Frost. Her parents, Daniel Frost, Naomi Frost. Not erased, not replaced, restored. Ellie's fingers rested on the paper, tracing each letter, like she was memorizing it for the first time. They didn't take it, she whispered. Cassian shook his head. No, he said. They just hid it. A small silence followed. Then, can I keep it? She asked. Cassian smiled faintly. It was always yours. That afternoon they went out together. Nothing grand, just simple things. A coat store where Ellie picked one herself, soft, warm, the color of deep winter blue. A small bookstore where she chose a new story, holding it close like it mattered. Because now it did. At the doctor's office, her name was called clearly. Not questioned, not checked twice, just spoken. Elowen Frost. Ellie looked up immediately, then at Cassian. A quiet smile formed. Later back home, she placed the documents carefully in a drawer beside Naomi's letter and the old children's book. Not hidden, not protected out of fear, just kept. For the first time in her life, she didn't need to prove she existed. She simply did. Winter didn't end all at once. It softened. Snow thinned along the sidewalks. The air lost its sharp edge. Light stayed a little longer each evening, as if the city itself was learning how to breathe again. Cassian stood outside the school gates. Different school. Smaller. Quieter. Real. Children moved past him in clusters, laughing, talking, holding on to backpacks instead of silence. Parents waited nearby, some distracted, some present, all part of something Ellie had never truly known before. Inside, the bell rang. Cassian didn't check his watch. He didn't need to. He was already there. The doors opened. Students poured out. And then he saw her. Ellie stepped into the light, her new coat wrapped neatly around her, her hair catching the soft afternoon sun. For a second she paused, just like she used to. Not out of fear, out of habit. Her eyes scanned the crowd. But this time they didn't keep searching. They found him. Immediately. Cassian lifted his hand slightly. Nothing dramatic. Just enough. Ellie's face changed, a small smile, then a real one. And then she ran, not carefully, not quietly. She ran straight toward him, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her footsteps quick and certain. Cassian stepped forward just in time to catch her as she reached him. She held on without hesitation, without apology. "I knew you'd be here," she said. Cassian rested his hand gently against her back. "Always," he replied. "No doubt, no distance, just truth." Around them, the world continued, cars passing, voices rising, life moving forward. But for Ellie, everything had already changed. She wasn't waiting anymore. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't a name hidden in paperwork or a child lost between doors that didn't exist. She was seen. She was known. She was home. And this time, when she walked away from the gate, she didn't look back. Did this story touch your heart? Let us know how you felt. Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments below. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss our next heartfelt story. Click the end screen to watch more emotional journeys. See you in the next one.